You are one.
All right, welcome everyone. This is the Joint Legislative Management Committee meeting on Wednesday, October 9th. We have a full agenda here today. Just a quick housekeeping update. We will be needing a November meeting to talk and review the legislative budget proposal. And so we will be sending out an email with some possible dates for early to mid-November. So just a heads up about that. And the next thing that we will take back up is a HR policy review. We started a conversation around the political activity policy, and I know that there's been more work done to make some adjustments and get more feedback. And so why don't we start there? We will go through the changes. We can have a conversation. My hope is that we could take a vote on this if we feel that it's ready. So with that, Maggie, will you come on up?
Anyone in particular? Actually,
Yeah, thank you so much.
So when we were here last, we went through the preamble and some of the definitions in this policy. And I just wanted to go back and summarize what we talked about the last time. So this draft policy begins with a preamble to explain the reason for the policy and the general guidelines. This information in the first two paragraphs is important because it's impossible to list out every action that's permitted, every action that is permitted not on the job, and then every action that would run afoul of this policy. So this is general guidance that sets out the overall goal of maintaining legislators and the public's faith in our staff's ability to provide nonpartisan, impartial service as a primary consideration that should guide employees when they're making decisions about their own political activities. We really want the public to know that we aren't letting our personal political views get in the way of the full expression and effectiveness of what legislators have been sent here to do. First Amendment jurisprudence also makes it clear that a government employer needs to have a really good reason for proactively limiting any political speech. It's a prior restraint doctrine. So the idea is that whenever possible, you take kind of a wait and see approach as opposed to setting out what's prohibited first. The thing about employment policies, though, is that you also want to provide fair notice of what employees can and can't do, so you're not in a situation where people are guessing. So that was sort of the overarching goal, was to toe that line between permitting as much as possible and seeing what does end up being improper versus letting people know up front what's prohibited and what isn't. So the major change that we made since the last time we were here is removing the section detailing what staff should do if they want to testify before General Assembly in their personal capacity. I should just say here that any testimony that an employee gives in their capacity as employee isn't covered by this policy. It's not covered by the First Amendment. That's just work stuff. The idea was that, so in the previous version of this policy, we had provided for employees who wanted to step out of their job role and talk about something that was of personal importance to them. And Arlene and I did speak with a few legislators, and they let us know that they and some of their colleagues were uncomfortable with the idea of staff providing testimony in their personal capacity. It just runs a high risk of compromising the appearance of nonpartisanship and impartiality in the eyes of the legislators and the public. And I personally thought that that was a compelling reason to take that out. And my understanding is that this doesn't happen with any regularity. So it was suggested to us, and I liked this terminology, that it was kind of a solution in search of a problem. So we did take that out. And I've highlighted in the prohibition section where we did add that. So we then have the bullet point sections then we have the definitions. And like I said the last time, we took many of these definitions from pre-existing policies, executive branch, and we also did get help on the definitions from the clerk of the House and from the Senate secretary. So that was very helpful. I'm happy to discuss any of the definitions if there are questions.
Anyone have a question? Go ahead.
I don't have any question on the definition. I just wanted to, let other people know who might not know, but Representative Shaw and I met with HR to discuss this provision around ledge counsel in particular, but staff in general, giving personal testimony and stepping out. And, for me, this addresses the issues that came to light in talking with other members and in talking to a couple members of ledge council. And so I just, wanted to let people know that I had that conversation.
Thank you. Yeah. Go ahead.
And I appreciated the time that the committee gave us to look into this just a little bit. And I did a similar thing that Representative Wood did, is just started talking to people in the building. And therefore, you see this new language in the bill, which HR has been very helpful getting it into the bill. I think it's important, and I think it's important that our staff remain politically neutral while they're working with us. We have a limited staff that have many different jobs. And I pointed out that I think I had 5 different attorneys servicing my committee last year. So it would have made it very difficult if we kept that policy in. And I appreciate your work on taking it out.
Should we feel that we can comment on any of the prohibitions at this point, or are you going to continue and you'd like us to hold questions for later?
My thought had been to go sort of section by section, starting with the unrestricted things. If it makes sense, we could have a discussion after each section. I think that makes sense, but I'm happy to proceed however you'd like.
That's fine.
Okay. So in the first section, we listed out a couple of things that employees can do without restriction: voting and registering to vote, having a political sign in your yard or at your residence, putting a bumper sticker on or sign on your personal vehicle, and parking it in a legislative parking lot, as long as it's not a candidate for the General Assembly or for or against the candidacy of a member of the General Assembly running for a different office. So were there any points on those 3?
Not see anything.
Okay. So next, we listed out some activities that are permissible outside of working hours, so when you're not on the job. And I'm happy to take questions, but there are just a couple that I thought should be highlighted because they're sort of illustrative of where we're going in general. So we said running for office in local elections to include active campaigning with notice to the employee supervisor. And that includes local partisan elections, partly because a lot of local elections just are partisan and didn't automatically sort of raise the kind of concerns about partiality and partisanship such that they should be restricted. For example, I think being a justice of the peace in the city of Montpelier is a partisan office, but I don't think that's the kind of thing that we want to prohibit. So we said attending political rallies and meetings in support of or against candidates for state or federal office, or state or federal political issues outside of work hours is okay. As long as the employee is not speaking at, organizing, managing, or otherwise assisting in conducting whatever this meeting is. And it's kind of a fine line, but the idea was getting information, being present, showing sort of passive support is fine and an important way to participate, but it's not a public alignment with an issue such that it calls into question the employee's ability to work in a nonpartisan manner.
That's the question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Just regarding local office participation, there are some offices, such as a member of a city council, for example, of a city in Vermont, in which the city is, that council is advocating for the legislature to do some specific things that may or may not be controversial. And I'm thinking in particular about Burlington and firearms and bars, or et cetera. At what point does that activity potentially present conflict with the legislature, because there may be different opinions of the legislature of how to deal with that particular issue?
Yeah, it's a really good point. I believe that situation would be covered by the state ethics code. And that would be a separate conversation outside of kind of the preliminary question of whether you can run and whether you can campaign and do that political activity. I mean, I completely agree that sounds problematic, but I do think it's separate from the issues raised in this particular policy. Does that make sense?
Well, it does on the one hand. On the other, once the individual is in office, there may be certain votes that he or she may be required to take as a member of a city council, for example, that might potentially infringe upon activities that the legislature is engaged in and debating. And I'm wondering just how we would instruct an employee of that position, who we have authorized to run effectively for that position, how we would deal with that potential conflict.
That's a good point. So are we saying that by being permitted to campaign and run, you are automatically permitted to do the work you're campaigning for? Because I think that the ethics code would say, maybe you can't do it at all, or maybe you have to recuse yourself when it comes to those votes.
Well, it's not just the votes, it's the debate. And if you're a local office holder, you're representing the voters who've elected you. And I just have a concern that the way we're wording this, we may be authorizing a person to hold office and represent to the voters that they're competent to do it and will do the job that they're elected to do. And then we've imposed a restriction that may potentially unknowingly and without warning disallow them to do what they were elected to do that we've authorized them to be elected for. I just have a concern and an unease as to how we deal with that.
Catherine, do you see your hand? I'll come to you next.
I think I'm tagging on to what Senator Brock is talking about. So the part about this that is a flag for me is the provided clause, provided that the employee is not speaking at, organizing, managing, or otherwise assisting in conducting. Just take that first part, is not speaking at. So you can attend, but you're prohibited from speaking or you'll lose your job. That strikes me as unconstitutional, I have to say. And then when I look at the list of prohibitions, one of the prohibitions is participating in the proceedings of a political party. I think of proceedings as a very all-inclusive term. So if you go and you speak at a meeting, you participated in the proceedings of that meeting. I'm not comfortable saying to people, when you take this job, you lose all of your political speech outside the building. With the exception of a sign in your yard or a bumper sticker. So I thought what you said at the beginning of your presentation was very wise. Don't specify if you don't have to specify. I'm wondering, do we need those bullet points at this point? Because we're laying out relatively clear paths to lots of things you can do. The language is including but not limited to. It's those places where we're making these hard and fast restrictions on vast quantities of speech that are problematic for me. Where we're saying you can go to a meeting, but you can't open your mouth or you run afoul of policy.
Yeah, so I hear what you're saying. I mean, the first thing I just want to clear up is that there's no automatic termination for.
Well, it does say up to including termination.
For sure. And we just want people to know that, you know, an egregious or repeated violation, you could be in like lose your job land. But there's always going to be a conversation first. There's always going to be, I mean, I think that even if there were a violation of the policy, I think it's unlikely to lead to termination. I just wouldn't want people to think that, you know, that's where we're automatically headed. And in terms of constitutionality, I mean, I did spend a fair amount of time looking at sort of other kinds of policies and restrictions. Catherine Benham sent me what the Congressional Budget Office has put out. I looked at the judicial canon for judges, which is significantly more restrictive because of rule of law issues. But I do understand what you're saying, and I wonder if it would be, I wonder whether saying something like provided, I mean, what if we just said something more general and said, you know, provided that the employee doesn't take a public position that would compromise their ability to act in an impartial manner or create the impression that they were
And I think the rest of the document is stating that in various ways. So I suppose what I'm proposing is simply the deletion of one of the bullet points under what you may do, or at least the clause that begins provided that the employee is not speaking at. If it ended with issues, and then under the prohibition side, the bullet point that begins participate in the proceedings of a political party. If we eliminated that bullet point and the half of the other bullet point, I would be fine. And then, of course, we're not saying definitively what we think about those issues. We're leaving it, as you said, I think, I forget the phrase you used, wait and see, or something like that.
okay. I mean, as long as organizing and managing a political rally or meeting in support of a candidate for state and federal office would be acceptable. You know, I don't want to leave that in.
Yeah.
If we're not limiting it in some way.
And I think it's a difference holding a position of responsibility in a party or, you know, being an officer of the party. I do think that's different than speaking at a rally. But in this bullet point, they're joined together. So either we could get rid of the speaking part of the clause and leave the rest, or eliminate the whole bullet point. But it's mostly in both places, the inability to participate in the proceedings or to speak strike me as too broad in their reach.
Just looking around the table, thoughts or feedback on this, let's say, proposed amendment?
Yeah, friendly.
I don't know if Katz was about this or not, but I frankly think less is more sometimes in situations like this. And for me, I would actually say attending political rallies and meetings. Period. That's where I would end, because it says attending, okay? It doesn't say organizing, it doesn't say speaking. And I think that there are other types of political rallies and meetings that are not just about state and federal office or political issues. So I think that less is more in this situation for me.
Representative James?
Thanks. Just a question I wanted to toss out to the group. I'm struggling a little bit with feeling like this is too restrictive, and I'm curious about the, I guess, the definition of, political material, political rallies, political events, as opposed to issue-based advocacy rallies, groups, and events. And there often is I guess I'd like to see us draw these lines as narrowly as possible to allow the greatest possible freedom. And so are you talking about only material and events and that are sponsored specifically by a political party?
That was not the intent. So the intent was impartiality and nonpartisanship, partly because I mean, there are, of course, issues that come up before the General Assembly that are heated and controversial, but don't follow party lines. And I think those could be equally damaging to working relationships and the appearance of propriety. So that had not been the intent.
So if there's a rally, or an event hosted by a political party, that's not different in your mind from, or in the policy from a rally or event that's put on by an advocacy group that works on a particular issue, like, I don't know, climate change or environmental. I'm trying in my mind to make this more narrow or understand what those gray areas are.
For the purpose of the policy as it's drafted, no, those things would not be different.
They would all be covered.
Yes.
And I suppose this is the root of my objection is, I think most everybody in the legislature would agree we want people to be good citizens and active citizens, participating, voting, participating in the whole civic discourse. So to say to all of our employees, once you sign your employment contract, you lose your ability to participate, to speak, et cetera. I don't want to be in that business. So I think I'm in line with what I hear Kath saying, which is if we eliminated, or maybe Teresa too, if we eliminated some of these problematic ones, there's plenty here that we're articulating that is not currently in policy. So if we are concerned about one, why not get rid of it? We're not saying it's opposite.
Yeah.
We're just remaining silent on that issue. And it seems like we've located 2 or 3 of those. So maybe that's a way to proceed.
Yeah. Oh, I think that's a really good point. There are always going to be things that are just left to people's good judgment and common sense in reading understanding the purpose and reading the guidelines. Yeah, I think that makes sense.
So if we're looking at, on page 4, the 5th bullet point, am I hearing some general consensus of putting a period after meetings, attending political rallies and meetings? Or are you saying just cut the whole thing?
I think we should get rid of that bullet point because I also don't want to tell people they're not allowed to participate. Because as you said, if a climate change rally is political, if a Let's Grow Kids rally is political, then we're saying you're just outside the civic discourse for the term.
Well, this is a section that says you can engage in these activities.
Oh, okay, yeah, then.
Just not over.
In that case.
Right.
really After meetings.
Right.
Okay, okay. All right.
And this section is about things
This is,
can do.
Yeah,
I was thinking of,
The next section,
proceedings.
yeah. So we are only in the may engage section right now, and the proposal on the table is just putting a period after meetings there.
Yes.
Senator Hashim?
Thank you. I think Representative Wood kind of got to what I was about to say. I mean, I agree with putting that period there, but also just, remembering that this is for outside of working hours. I mean, I would hope, people aren't, staff in the State House aren't attending rallies when they're, when they should be at work or, yeah, so that's all, my 2 cents.
All right, so oh, yes, go ahead, Representative.
So my question is, do we really need this whole section of employees may engage in some political activities outside of working hours, including, because the next section says this is what you can't do. So do we need this, what you can do?
I think it's helpful as a list of, it just is putting people on notice of the things that are okay, as long as you're not doing them while you're at work. So for example, signing nominating petitions, I'm sorry. That is something that's fine, but it's something that shouldn't take place in the legislative workspace. And displaying political paraphernalia such as a button badge or political clothing, fine, but not in the legislative workspace. So that was the intent of having that section of absolutely go for it. Just, it would be disruptive if it were to take place while you're here doing work with legislators and the public.
Yeah, Representative Shaw. It might be helpful as a roadmap just to help people get acquainted. What we're doing is all new, right? We're trying to set general policies for employees, and so helpful to have some examples to give them some context.
Sometimes there's more in what you don't say than what you do say.
Yeah, that's true. Okay. Did you want to pursue?
No,
it, or-
I'm beyond that.
All right, so, but I'm just gonna give folks any other comments on this, this edit and amendment here before we go forth and strike and put the period there? We're good? Okay, great. Senator Brock, I still think that this doesn't address your point, though, that you raised, and I'm wondering for that issue, if it makes sense for us, but we can continue to go through this document and finish it, but maybe do a little bit more research on the ethics side of it, so we have a clear answer for you and so that we're all
I
clear.
think that would be helpful.
Yeah,
I guess I also have a concern regarding what this would not say if we put the period in. And maybe we want to be general right now and sort of
fill it out.
see where it goes. But
Yeah.
if you have a situation in which you had, let's say, an attorney who is drafting the legislation for the committee that you're on, who is participating in a meeting that is trying to get you removed from office because you're no good in terms of the position of the people speaking at the meeting and organizing and participating. The issue, well, where does the participation end? Is the person who is the employee of the legislature, he can go to that lynching meeting, but he just can't talk at it.
Well, we got rid of the can't talk part. So I think to go back to what we were hearing before, it does make sense to me to think of this as a rollout of this, and then we're going to be working with it. And I think discretion is always going to be part of every case. So what you lay out is a pretty extreme case. And I would think that the legislature would have a bone to pick with that employee via this policy, but it would have to be quasi adjudicated at that point.
I think a little more study
Yeah.
would be useful
We can
going
do
down
that.
the road. This is fine for now.
Okay,
Yeah.
Sounds good. All right, thank you. Any other thoughts or edits on this section before we go to the shall not section? Are we good?
I did just want to note the other thing that we changed in campaigning for or against constitutional proposals. Once they're out of the building, once they've been submitted to the electorate and are in that process. Okay, and then we set out the section of things that legislative employees can't do anytime. And Senator Bruce, you're absolutely right that by taking government employment, nobody checks the phrase that the Supreme Court uses is that you don't check your political rights and being at the door. So we do want to proceed with caution, and I do appreciate that. So these first 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 bullet points are in common with most other governmental employee political activity policies and codes. And this is sort of what I would call Hatch Act stuff, where you don't want people who are employees of the General Assembly going out and suggesting that the imprimatur of the General Assembly is on whatever they're doing. You don't want people abusing government resources for their own sort of political priorities, using official authority, influence, or position to coerce. So these are in common with the executive branch and the judicial canon. Performing research or other work for a member of the General Assembly that's for use on a political campaign, just so people know that that line does exist between legislative work, sort of qua legislative work, and then the campaign stuff. So I did want to highlight that we did prohibit contributing money to the political campaigns of candidates for the General Assembly or current General Assembly members who are running for other office. It raises questions of favoritism, and it also raises, potential uncomfortable situations for employees who might feel like they should or have to contribute. So we just put that in there more as an employee protection than anything else. We put fundraise, solicit, or collect contributions on behalf of a partisan political group or candidate for state or federal office in this prohibited category. And that it's sort of a fine line between that and the actual donation itself, which is permitted. Because we wanted to allow as much as possible. And we thought that it made sense to allow people to, if I want to contribute $50 to a candidate for governor, that's one thing. But if I go out and actively solicit, fundraise, encourage other people to give money to some candidate, that crosses a line, again, in sort of public alignment of myself in a way that maybe calls into question my nonpartisanship. So we do have a bullet point here prohibiting organizing or managing political meetings, rallies, political parties, clubs, or organizations. And honestly, maybe that probably covers what we crossed out in the attend a meeting section above. So that I just think that makes the change all the more rational.
And I agree as long as bullet point 4 is edited or eliminated, because that's the one that goes back to the very general idea of participating in proceedings. Seems the other ones focus on organizing, managing, occupying a position of influence, et cetera. But it's not bullet point 4.
I see.
It's bullet point 10.
On that page, though.
Yeah.
Or it's on page 5.
Right. Participate in the proceedings of a political party. That seems to me so incredibly broad. Because if you respond to an email, are you participating in the proceedings? So So I just don't see the need for bullet point 10, given the other things that we have. You're prohibited below from organizing or managing political meetings, rallies, political parties, et cetera. The only thing there is the political convention. And I suppose if that people want that to stay, I would be okay with that. I would just get rid of that first chunk about participating in the proceedings of a political party or convention. Because again, you have a right to speech, you have a right to organize politically, or to be a part of a meeting politically, so.
Representative James?
Thanks. Just something I'm trying to think through in my own mind as I read this section, is whether we're intending this document to get at actual conflicts of interest or to try to list every possible perceived conflict of interest. Because this document it's too restrictive for me. I'm not comfortable with parts of it. And when I think about all the ways in which a General Assembly staff person could participate in these things without really any impact on their job or their integrity whatsoever. I really wonder about telling folks they can't volunteer in any way for a federal election, telling folks they can't collect contributions on behalf of a partisan political group, that they can't organize or manage political meetings or rallies. There's a lot here that it feels too restrictive to me. And I guess I wonder whether, are we trying to get at actual conflicts of interest, or are we trying to create an exhaustive list of anything that, if taken to an extreme, could create the perception of a conflict of interest? Because those are two different things.
Yeah, I think we're somewhere in the middle of those two things, where the aim was to prohibit actual conflicts and give a reasonable guide as to what would create the appearance of impropriety such that it has a chilling effect on the work of the legislature. So that if a legislator has work with a member of legislative staff and they want they need to be able to go to their member of legislative staff and say, could you please help me with this thing? And know that the person is not going to let any of their personal beliefs get in the way of that. And so the idea is that if a member of legislative staff has taken a position that creates the appearance that maybe they couldn't work on the other side of an issue, or they couldn't work with somebody of a different party, then that's what we're looking to, that's what the aim of the policy is to prevent, as well as making sure that the public doesn't think that legislative staff is aligned in one way or another, and that the staff, there isn't this kind of impression that the legislative staff is putting a thumb on the scale. So that was the impression. And I mean, you're the legislators. I don't really know what that chilling effect is or where this balance is. So
I guess for me, every single one of us, whether we're an elected official or whether we're an attorney, working for Ledge Council, already come to the table with all of our own beliefs and the folks we vote for in the privacy of the ballot box, and the groups that we support and the issues that we care about. And I feel like we need to have some level of a high level of trust in the integrity of the folks that we hire to do that work, that they're going to be able to set aside those beliefs whoever they vote for in the privacy of the voting booth, like I said, and do good work. And limiting their ability to participate in some pretty basic political activities doesn't actually change what they believe or what they support. The bottom line is you still need to believe that you're going to hire people that are going to bring their best selves to the work. And so I'd like to see as few restrictions as possible on their ability to act on those beliefs outside of the workplace in a reasonable way.
So, we have time to work on this. There's no pressure on us to pass this policy today. And I'm wondering, Representative James, and I see your hand, Senator, we'll get to you right after this. I wonder, Representative James, if you would want to work on some alternative language that kind of gets to the heart of what you're talking about, to see if there's a alternative path that kind of tackle the what we're trying to achieve here?
Only if folks agree with me. I'm happy to express myself and then be overruled if everybody thinks I'm taking this too far. I don't want to waste my time, and I don't want to waste everybody else's time. So,
Yeah.
I've kind of said how I felt. This list it outlines too many things for me. I think it has sort of a chilling effect, and so I'm not comfortable with it, but I may be the only person in the room that feels that way. And I don't like to waste my colleagues' time if I'm in the minority. We can happily move on.
Senator Sheen, is this on the same topic or?
Well, just to add that I do agree with Representative James, and it kind of sounds like we might be moving on. So I'll just say I do agree with Representative James on this.
Go ahead.
So I think there's benefit to having examples. I think, there's like 20 here. I think that it could be narrowed down and to be more, I guess, holistic, as opposed to trying to think about every particular circumstance that there might be. So I see benefit to having some examples, but some of these things actually cross over each other, and so I feel like some of them are a little bit duplicative.
Yeah.
So I think I'd be in favor of a little bit more work on this as well.
Agreed. I just want to suggest, if you look at the list on page 4, the first 7 seem of one category. That is, they all are very clear that you can't use government funds, official authority, General Assembly resources, et cetera, or the insignia, or do research for a campaign with your General Assembly time. So the first 7, I think, are in one category that's much easier to approve. Then from there, they go into what people are doing in their lives away from the official authority and the official time. That's where everybody's having the issue. So that might be a place to start a rewrite, is trying to keep it closer to that list of the first 7.
Any other thoughts on that? Representative Shaw, go ahead.
So Senator Ruth, what about number 8, the testifying piece?
I have been on committees where General Assembly employees have testified. And they were very rare instances where those employees felt strongly, and I never noticed any negative impact. So I personally don't see the need to legislate or lay out that an employee cannot testify. I think it's something that should be done with caution, but I'm a little hesitant to deny them that ability, because they're citizens as well as.
And I'm at the other end of the spectrum, and
I'd be uncomfortable with taking that out.
Yeah.
Okay, and I could see leaving it in. So I know that the chair wants to move on. I'm just saying, for me, the first 8 are probably acceptable, and I think that's where 90% of our trouble is coming in, is beyond that.
seeing head shakes, so that's good. So I'm getting some consensus around the room. So we have the three follow-ups on this. We'll continue to further kind of investigate the ethics part that Senator Brock mentioned. We have the edit on page 4 on that 5th bullet point that we made, and then looking down after the testify bullet point, looking down at those to maybe edit or cut or come up with something that's a little bit more general. So happy to follow up with you all to help work on this and prepare it for our next meeting. Senator Brock?
I would just add, though, in terms of what might be perceived as a potential conflict of interest, is I would be concerned if a employee of the legislature, and I'm thinking more of our attorneys than anyone else at this point, is actively engaged in a political group or activity that is opposed to something that a legislative member is asking to have drafted. That creates at least a perception that there could be a conflict of interest in terms of being well represented. And I think we should be very careful about that area.
Yeah.
That's why you don't allow public employees, if you think of federal employees, as well as other state employees, to do anything and everything. There comes a point in which you have to define where that separation exists. Now, theoretically, in the private sector, you would say, well, I'm going to get another attorney. But when we're dealing here in the legislature, in a committee, we don't have that ability.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's the concern.
Yeah.
It's a two-way street here.
Yeah, I hear you. Okay. All right, thank you for that. So thank you for this thoughtful conversation. We will continue this at our November meeting. And if you do have any other thoughts or feedback, committee members, please don't hesitate to reach out as we work on this. So next on our agenda is State House renovation. We have our Sergeant at Arms here, Agatha, and we have Joe from BGS. Please come on up. Welcome. Members, you have a PowerPoint presentation or copy in your pile. Welcome.
Thank you. Agatha Kessler, Sergeant at Arms.
I am Joe Agier, Director for Design and Construction, Buildings and General Services.
So we're here to give an update on the schematic designs. I think the last time this committee reviewed any information, it was December of last year. So we've been working on the schematic designs. Also in the audience, if you don't mind, I'll point out Sean Brennan with Freeman French Freeman, the architect firm that's been working on this, his team. We have David Sheets, State Curator, and Trisha Harper, who is a consultant for the legislature. She's an architect. Did I miss anybody? No, I think that's it. So I'll turn over to Joe. This is a BGS-led project. The Sergeant at Arms were considered, and the legislature were considered the customer group, but it is BGS that's running this project. So, Joe.
Thank you. The slideshow will be presented. And it is a lengthy slideshow, so I will go through relatively quick. Please stop and ask me questions. Next slide. So how we got here. Our background is that it started out with Act 83. Moving forward to be looking at, in addition, it was from a summer study committee that got us here. And we've been going around and around a little bit as to where we have been. But right now we had direction in May of 2022 for us to start collaborating with the Sergeant at Arms office to get us where we are today. Next slide, please. What came out of that was trying to use ARPA funds to help us through this process. 1.5 million was appropriated of ARPA funds for this project. And under the final rule from the Federal Register on the state fiscal recovery funds, it was somewhat limited as to what we could do and how to use those funds. You just could not go out and do a straight addition for more space. So here we have the capital expenditures have to be related and reasonably proportional to response to the public health. of a negative economic impact, such as the pandemic. Granted, the next pandemic probably is not going to be the same, but this is how it was came down through us and how we looked at things. Now, you also have to balance through the effectiveness and the cost of the capital expenditures. Choose the most cost-effective option. New construction may not be proportional response to mitigate for COVID-19. So this is around COVID-19. And the reason that's important is it's going to come up a little bit later, but that's how the lens that we were looking for when we first started this project. Next slide. Act 162 of 2024, we have French Freeman, our architect for design. They completed the draft schematic program, then presented a draft schematic design. And through that, we had 8 bullet points of how to move forward and what to be looking at. This was a phase 1 of scenario 1. They had presented several scenarios, and it was divided up into a phase 1 and then a phase 2. This, what we're presenting today, is only phase 1. So we're looking at the new entry as you come in on the north.
Stop you, and this is a question for the chair, I suppose. So in our earlier meetings, we've made some preliminary votes on what we were calling phase 1.
Yep.
Which was most of this list, but not the last 2 bullet points, as I remember. So in other words, I thought we had talked about doing the ADA compliance, the ingress, egress, all of those sorts of things. The committee rooms and the cafeteria, I thought were part of what we had put off to the second phase. And I'm wondering, is that just committee terminology versus what this schematic design is using, or?
So that was still here, and that was a slide that I brought forward. So further on, I will get into all the committee rooms.
Okay.
Yeah. So going through all of this, everything that they looked at, the picture you see on the right-hand side with the ellipses, it's showing the areas roughly of what we're looking at to renovate under this phase. And so at that point in time, in 2023, we had that estimated cost of approximately 11.6 million. If that does not include the site work, that'll be brought up again a little bit later. So I just wanted to point that out. So it was approved by the Jlmc in December 15th of 2023. We were here and we had direction to move forward. Next slide. So out of that, we're moving forward with the schematic design phase. We've been meeting mostly bi-weekly with French Freeman, asking questions, listening to and taking input, and coming back and showing us some sketches, providing feedback, and moving this process forward. Part of that during that time frame also was the fact that with looking at using the ARPA funds in the direction from the final rule, was looking at how to maintain separation. And we settled on that 20 square feet that you approved on per person. That brought about committee rooms, mainly in the Senate, but also in the House, but mainly in the Senate. Those rooms were not large enough when you're using 20 square feet per person to be able to be used. So the direction that we had that came out in the capital bill was that we were not to touch the committee room. So some of the roof that goes to that. So that's where that came about, is we were looking at that. And so there was a discussion that we were held up, the design team was held up on moving forward along those lines, because the only way to make it work without doing any renovation was really to spread the House and the Senate around the whole State House as a whole. Not what everybody's accustomed to, where the Senate's, basically on the east side and the House is over on the west side. And that would work in a pandemic situation. So did working from afar. None of them are great, but in a pandemic, it worked and you got through. And that's what this is trying to do, is still, how do you function in another situation like that? And that's where we're going forward. Next slide, please. So out of this, we had the west entry, and what we're the proposed sketch that you'll see further on is we're looking at 10,345 square foot addition that we're putting for 3 stories. We have the entry, 2 stories of committee rooms, We continue with full ADA access coming on the western side. It also provides for a screening point. That was part of the ARPA stuff that we're looking at doing. We have the east egress stairs. That's coming off of the Senate chambers, out of the coat room, so that they have a second means of egress. We're looking for a new corridor and atrium connecting the new west entrance to over here, coming into the Lincoln Tunnel. Adding some restrooms. My restrooms. We still have the cafeteria in here. We have not done any work on that. And if you don't want to move forward on it, that's easy. I can easily take that out. So next slide, please. So now that I have before you is a sketch that Prince Truman put together at what this entry would look like. Don't necessarily focus on all the glass that is there. There's been discussions for and against, but this is concept at schematic design phase. If it's approved and you're moving forward, that's where things are going to change in the next round. But right now, this is what we have is your approach is from the west entry coming up Aiken Avenue. How that whole site work would all lay out, we don't have that in play yet. Have these stairs that walks you into the front entrance. Onto the left that is not shown here would be your accessible entry into the building. So it's not a ramp, it's actually because of the way the elevation goes, you would just be able to park and then enter into that side of the building.
Representative Wood?
Yeah, I mean, you touched, Joe, on a concern that I had around the all glass nature, not so much in the maybe entrance area, but in committee rooms, that in the entrance area is this place you will pass through. In the committee rooms, I have a lot of concern about all glass.
There are ways to mitigate that with, ballistic glazing and likes of that, or even less glass.
Yeah.
But it's a concept, like I said, at this point in time. Take all the feedback you want to give us along those lines.
I'll add Representative Wood that Chief Polway was invited to some of these planning sessions, and so was Director of Security for BGS, Bill McSallis. So when Joe says there are pluses and minuses to the glass, we've discussed those. And there are some architectural responses to help protect a structure like this, but it will come down to what the legislature is comfortable with.
And I mean, I presume with modern materials and, modern HVAC systems, that temperature control in there would not be as much of an issue as it is, for instance, in my room upstairs with 4 windows.
Technically, theoretically, yes.
Right,
Sometimes reality, it's different.
right.
Take a
So,
legislator.
the all glass, I mean, I think it's beautiful looking and it still just gives me pause in rooms where people will be all day. I know that the one committee who is in an all glass room essentially now feels a little bit exposed.
Yeah.
Well, a lot bit exposed. It shouldn't have been that way.
Right.
It was mentioned at the last meeting that we had about a view looking from State Street. This is just one shot along State Street, looking up between the trees. So in another probably 3 weeks, the view is going to be greater when you're standing on State Street looking up. And we've also added an additional slide. The next slide, please, because the spruces that are out there are really somewhat past their prime, and probably in the next 5 years will be coming down. Something else will be going in its place. We're not going to be planting, another 20-foot tree to try and hide it. So it is also about seeing it so that you have wayfinding that this is the entrance to the State House and not someplace else on the east side or the likes of that. So that's what we're looking at. You will see more of it. Depends on where you are on State Street, Aiken Avenue, what time of season it is and the likes of that. But this gives you a rough idea that it's not, it doesn't stand out, take away from the rest of the State House. It's just there. And you will see. Next slide, please.
Thank you for that. I can't see her. Representative Evans, did you
Yes,
have a question?
I do have a question, and
Okay.
it's on this slide here where the proposed addition is going beyond the visual footprint of the State House. And Joe, I wonder if you could explain what that then triggers in terms of what entities would then have to review this proposal on the national level, as well as the Capitol Complex Commission, as well as any other entity.
Because this is an addition to the State House, it is on the historic register, it has to go through both federal and local. Here would be the Capitol Complex, but the Federal Parks and Recreation will be evaluating this and reviewing it and giving us feedback. Good, bad, or indifferent, but so it has to go through all those levels. Even if it was not seen from the road, we still would have to go through that process. So all those things that I think we mentioned at one of the last meetings of everybody having to weigh in and get that feedback. Those permits have to be obtained before we would be moving forward.
Representative Emmons, do you have any follow-ups or?
Yes, I do. So this addition, this is phase 1 of scenario 1.
We had multiple scenarios. We broke them up into 2 phases. So
Right,
this is phase 1, correct?
of scenario 1.
There's only one scenario in this case.
Okay, for 11.6 million. And it does not include site work. So what is needed for site work? And is there a ballpark figure you would have for the cost of that?
Do not have a ballpark figure working backwards because we have not started evaluating the site work as of yet. We were still trying to get to what the building itself, the addition was going to look like before we moved on to the site work. The vision of the site work is to provide accessibility. So there would be some accessible parking in the area. There's also, right now, when the buses come up for visitors, they're stopping on a hill. So how do we improve that? We have a better bus drop off and vehicles circulating through. And still to throw that mix in, we have evaluated how to get, equipment, materials into the building, and it's still having that on that side as a servant's entrance for the cafeteria. So you still would have those trucks interacting. So we have not done site work yet. And like I said, I don't have an estimate yet on that until you approve this, then we'll be moving forward with that also.
So would there be any need for any blasting to occur because it's all ledge? on
Yes,
one
there would
side
be
there?
blasting. Yes, there would be.
I think
Or
we need to
removal
be,
of lead.
yeah, I think we need to be very, very clear what else is needed here in terms of site work, because that's going to increase the cost substantially, possibly.
Yes, if you remember, State House batteries for the emergency power, we had just relocated those last year. My guess would be that they would get relocated. But also part of that process is the batteries that we have large enough for this addition, what we're looking to do for emergency power. So we may be adding more cells to the batteries. So we're just not there yet.
And last question, how does this tie in with the current work for the HVAC system? Is this going to be additional to that?
The easy answer to that is yes, it is additional. The sequencing and how things will work at the phases that we are at right now with the HVAC system is relatively difficult to explain. I am going to get to that, and I do have slides to show you and what to present to you.
Is the 11.6 million, does that include the HVAC that would need to be included in this addition?
Yes, it does.
Okay. That's it for me.
What, go ahead.
So I have a couple of more general questions. So do the cost estimates include, because we lose some parking in this because of, the proximity. So does it include some relocation or replacement of that parking or some?
We have not looked at that yet.
Okay.
We don't, until we have a rough site plan of what we're going to do, we do not know how much parking we will lose.
Okay. And then I'm just also, I mean, I'm aware of, you know, some of the design, having lived through a renovation of a 110-year-old school building and recognizing that you don't try to match what's there, you try to, you know, develop something that's more of the period, so you know when things were added. I'm just also like wondering about the practicality of round committee rooms. So I'm just throwing that out there as, you know, it might look nice from the outside, but, you know, practically, you know, is that make sense?
And we did discuss that in the group. And the architects, John's group, has come up with some potential layouts for how the tables would look, the chairs would look. We don't have those drawings included in this, so it'd be part of the further discussion, but having a committee room in a circle shape and where the furniture would go has been considered. Whether or not it would be considered comfortable or awkward is another conversation.
Right. And I mean, I just think we need to consider the usage of the building as well as the aesthetics of the building.
Any other questions before we?
All right, next slide. This will go relatively fast, where I'm showing you floor plan, overall floor plans, and then we zoom in. So as you can see here, we have the entrance, the new entrance on the left-hand side, and you have your new entry. You come into the entry, there's a stair tower, elevator, connecting way, atrium, stairs onto the east side for both egress out of the cafeteria speakers area and also the Senate room. Next slide, please. The next slide is going to show you a zoomed in view of it. So again, we're coming into, on the left-hand side, you see more at the top of the screen, you'll see there's a long hallway going to the backside. That's that service entrance that I'm talking about. Also, you have, it's not a ramp, it's an actual walkway paralleling the building that brings you into the front door and the stairs. So everybody gets to come in the same front door.
Will you say that again? Because that's important to me.
So right up in here, you can see we have this here is that service entrance going to the back side. Then we have over here, which we haven't discussed yet about parking and everything else. This here is a level entrance coming into the building. So we have stairs out front because the grade does drop off. But at this point, it's not a ramp. You're just coming in on a level entrance. And then you're walking into the entryway. Here we have two goes to security, these rooms here, so that, you know, whenever there's something issue when somebody's coming into the building, you're gonna take them aside, screen them like so that you can do that in here and out of the way. Once you come in through here, we have a new stair tower and a new elevator shaft going up. And that's because of the 3 stories. Then you can work your way through and run down the connector. This still here is your means out. You walk back through and then down the stairs and or off the backside.
So, thank you. Thank you for being clear about that. So a real value, I think, for creating this entrance. And obviously one of the main things is to have an accessible entrance for all of the public. And I just want to assure that it doesn't feel like people are walking through the service entrance in order to access what will become the entrance that most people use on a daily basis.
So that's why we do have that backside through here, so the service.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just seeing the close proximity and I realize we're dealing with the contours of the land and all of that kind of stuff. So that's just, you know, something you can kind of, you know, keep in mind as we, you know, go forward on this, that, you know, whatever screening or what, you know, whatever makes it obvious that this is an entrance for all people to use, not only people who have mobility issues.
Right.
That would be.
This is the entrance.
Yeah.
And it is large enough, you know, for the buses and everything else that are coming, the school kids, that it's not only for processing, but they can all mainly get into the lobby to then move forward to wherever they're going.
So that it would be a departure from what we have currently, which is the handicap accessible entrance, which is used substantially this time of year, with all of the tourists coming, is also where all of the deliveries are coming in as well. The moving truck is backing up to that is a very chaotic entry point to the State House, and it's also the only way to get in if you need access. ADA access.
Yeah, and so to me, this actually, while it makes it bigger, it seems to perpetuate that. Because the service entrance is still in the same, essentially in the same location, pushed back. So I just, it's a caution.
The hard part that we have here is on the east side over here is how to make that all work. We evaluated to, a quick look. But we had so many negatives of, could we make the east side the main entrance?
Mhm.
And just so much going on over on this
Yeah.
side. It wasn't doable, and service is the same thing, but how do you get a truck all the way back into the Lincoln tunnel? So that was the hard part. It will be up to the architect, landscape architect, how to really address this area over in here to keep everybody separate, like you said, that this is the entrance and the service entrance is not.
Thank you.
So you continue down this corridor. As you come down the corridor, you have here off to the left, this here is the existing building. This changes, and that's why it's in sort of a darker blue, although it's existing. It's what are we going to do with this space? Certainly the stair tower, we're looking to pull out because we're having one here. There's talk of leaving the existing elevator and using that for service so that you're not having both service and visitors, employees, people using the same elevator at the same time. This here is an electrical room that's at this point in time is staying out of room. Over here, we lost, there's the lactation room. There's also a bathroom there. Got to relocate some of those. If you continue down the hallway, we now have adding 2 restrooms here in the corner of the coat room. Here you have the corridor coming in, copy room, legislative lounge. You continue down this connector, and then we open up into an atrium. So this is roughly almost a 3-story atrium that you would be entering into. Then we have a vestibule here at the end. Again, legislators, staff can be coming in this side who are parked on the east side to be walking down through and getting into the building. Visitors and the likes of that, school groups walking through, and you're on a tour, you're fumbling through here and then coming through the Lincoln Tunnel and then starting your tour all the way through. We have the stair tower over here that comes off of the Senate chamber, where they'll be exiting out into this eastern parking lot. And this is the beginning of what you see at that first floor elevation, the stairs that go up to not only the mezzanine, but also to the speaker cafeteria area, instead of having to travel in on the back side of the cafeteria.
Is there a structural, I was kind of thrown off a little bit by this extra wall and doorway inside the atrium. Is there?
This here?
Yeah.
Vestibule. So when you open this door here, you're not losing all
Oh,
the
the
heat or
cold,
cooler.
yeah,
Yes,
heat, cold, yeah,
vestibule
okay,
now
thank you.
required.
Yeah, I knew there was a logical reason.
Next slide. So what we're looking at here is the mezzanine level. I'd be easier, I think, just to go to the next slide. And at that level here again, you're seeing stair tower, the elevator, and how you would work your way through. This area here is where one of the new committee rooms. It's under construction is right now. The other committee room is right over here. They're adding 2 restrooms here. And so that flow gets you from the main entrance into this area. And then we also have on the back side here, that exit over on the east side. So anybody in here can now use the back stairway as opposed to going down the circular stairs. Still kicking around whether that's enclosed or not. Pluses and minuses. Next slide. And now we're working on to the second floor. Again, left to right on how it's all laid out. Next slide, please. So you're on the second floor. We've already through the elevator stair tower, new committee room, additional circulation space here coming in, connecting the 2 buildings. We still have that disconnect in height. So what we're doing now is we've done away with the ramp in the card room. We are looking to use room 33 as a means of also egress, because we're going to do away with the fire escape that's outside. We'll be able to get you into the stair tower. Your connection through here would be ramps to get you up to the cafeteria level. So we still need a ramp, but now it's out in this open area that gets you in there. Card room, again, this where the ramp is, doing away with that. Push the door out another window on this side. We're creating the window here probably, but get a set of stairs and you can work your way up. Staging to get you into the cafeteria, like that. out here in a lot larger space than that ramp and entry going into the cafeteria. We're infilling above the existing mechanical space, and with that, we're getting 2 restrooms also added in. Continuing on down here, this is just a connecting roof. A lot of this is also due for some of the snow and the ice buildup from the wind and the likes of that. New atrium, and again, you see over here, the exit stairs coming off of the 2nd floor, also off of the visiting level, and then the cafeteria level in the speaker's office. Stair tower here coming off the coat room.
Representative Shaw.
Thanks. Joe, can you help me understand where the public is going to access the cafeteria in this plan?
Whether you're coming up these stairs, the elevator, or from Cedar Creek Room, working your way through, it's coming in through this area here. Basically the same door that you're coming in now.
Okay.
So there's a level floor here and working our way a ramp up, or you can take the stairs up to that level to get you.
So they're gonna, I don't want to be a hard head here, take up too much time, but so you're gonna come into the existing card room, take a left.
If you have to take the ramp, yes. Now you take the stairs.
Okay.
If you're in this end of the hallway, you'll be able to walk through here, room
So you
30.
direct the public down into the committee rooms.
The public would continue straight through.
Okay.
Because this here becomes more of the means of egress, so we can do away with the fire escape.
Got it. Thank you.
So that glass ramp area that we go up now, that would be eliminated.
Yes.
Okay.
3rd floor? 3rd floor step in for orientation. Left sides, the east entrance, committee room, circulation, HVAC, atrium below. Next slide, can you zoom in on that? Committee room here on the 3rd floor, very similar to what was on the 2nd floor. Stair tower, elevator, additional circulation space. Because of the difference in roof lines and the likes of that, how everything works, and we need some space for HVAC, this area here becomes HVAC area now, which is basically above the restrooms outside of the cafeteria. There's dead space up there right now, sort of a hip roof. We'd integrate that in here, so we do have room to pick up new HVAC systems. Here you're seeing roof infills in the new atrium. For the 3rd floor, you're not connecting down all the way through. It just stops at this location right here, and we do have this connector running through. Most of Representative Shaw, that you don't have that flow through on the 3rd floor now. You have a flow through in this plan, but again, most of the public is not up on the 3rd floor.
So the idea is to keep it into the new
Yes.
addition. That flow.
I only see one stairway that the public has access to on that 3rd floor.
This is the new stairway. This is the existing stairway.
So that's on the 3rd floor.
Yes, it is.
Okay, so that, all right.
Yeah.
So there's two
Elevator,
there's 2 stair exits
Yeah.
down from the 3rd floor.
yes,
Okay.
And 2 elevators, right, Joe?
yes. Elevator, elevator.
And so how does that impact the existing committee rooms on the 3rd floor? Like where Ag is in the corner there, right?
It should not impact them other than similar to what you're seeing here. The architect has designed that they think that we can have a hole through the floor, so you're allowing some of the light that's upstairs to be going down and somewhat of separation off of the committee room. But maybe there still be some low blinds shutters in this area here, so if somebody's not looking in the committee room's action. There is
So
that,
what are exterior windows won't be exterior windows anymore.
that is correct.
And then that next room, what, yeah, that, I
The
mean,
blue one?
yeah,
This here is room 47, and it becomes a walkway, it means
becomes a
egress
walkway into
because
there,
the
okay,
fire escape that's here goes away.
okay. And then would be no exterior windows to where waste.
Correct, these are all now interior, become interior windows.
How do
Maybe
you
better than the
deal with,
brick wall.
yeah, how do you deal with natural light at all? There won't be any natural light in those The one on the end where ag is now will have natural light, but it doesn't look like there will be any natural light in that one in the center.
I don't know if we were looking at skylights or anything like that.
We had been, yes.
Okay, so we're looking to try and get natural light in here from the roof down. Like we are doing over here in the atrium.
Uh-huh,
So there is some of that sunlight coming through.
yeah. Hmm.
I would need a little bit more architectural work to really to see what that looks like.
Thank you.
Next slide. Next slide is just an overall roof plan, that basically this is all roof. So committee rooms here, trying to get some sunlight in through here in the circulation space, and then this is all just roof. Next set of slides that are coming up now are sort of a picture walkthrough to give you an idea, a sense of what it's going to look like. So on this path, this red dotted line that you see here, I've got pictures of existing, and then we have the architect giving you a visual of roughly what it could look like. It's not perfect, but it's there. So we're starting here at the new entryway and the loading dock looking southwest. Next slide, please. And so what you see here, you're looking out at 1 Baldwin, 133, 2 Aiken, and a little bit of the parking lot. We are out here in this area here. Next slide. So this is still that view, standing in roughly the same location, looking out. This here's the lobby. So you're still seeing that there's some potential parking out through here. How that works is only the graphic. Not sure. We wouldn't be parking right next to the building. But all that still has to be reworked somehow. There's that thought of, as you're looking at here, can we get a bus entrance into this area here? How would that look? How does that flow? Where does service come in? Maybe service comes in the backside of 1 Baldwin. Don't like that. We still have to work through all that. This is just a concept to go, shall we continue? Next slide. The next slide, basically, we're now going dot in and somewhat just turn around about 5-10 feet. Next slide. What we're looking at on the next slide is we're looking at the vestibule that's existing now. Off here behind the dumpster to the left is the entry into that stair tower and elevator. Next slide. So now you're looking from your entryway coming through the doors to get you beyond that point. We have over here the same elevator entrance. Working our way down here is room.
Senate Ed.
Yes, thank you. And so that's these 2 windows here. This here's a doorway. This doorway here would bring you down into beyond the copy room, legislative lounge. This little sliver of gray off into here would take you into the coat room. So we're just looking down this corridor as we continue down. This slice of red down there is that new mechanical room that they're finishing off right now.
So this is internal now, so
This is, yes, it is.
you're inside the building, so what is current external wall, that one right there on the right, is now gonna be inside,
That is correct.
okay?
Yes.
Next slide. Now we move a little bit further down the corridor, just outside the coat room, giving you a better visualization of what this corridor looks like and the glass entry under the arch. Next slide. So this is what you see now. You're seeing the vestibule, you're seeing the stair tower that takes you to the mezzanine. All that goes away and it opens up. Next slide, please. You see here, this is a door taking you to the copy room, legislative lounge. Door here off into the coat room and continuing down this corridor, the mechanical addition, and then you can see it. So if you're walking through, once you get through the front entrance, you can then see the far end and work your way down through. And then you have that vestibule.
So similarly, Representative Wood, these are external windows now, and the new mezzanine rooms, those will all become internal windows.
Yes. Next slide. Now we move a little bit further down, just at the edge of the new mechanical room. So you're gonna enter the atrium area and have that visual look. Next slide. So this is what it looks like now. You have over here, this here is room 11. House chambers, off into the speakers area. Next slide. And roughly what it looks like now. Up here, we start with skylight up top. You have a 3-story open area that you're now entering. You do have the glass vestibule. So as you're walking down through and you're doing a tour or whatever, you're going to be going through this door and then taking that right. Next slide.
Michelle, go ahead.
So it looks like neither of the existing walls are going to be load bearing for the additions. They're going to be all held up, the addition will be held up with the columns.
That is correct.
Thank you.
Are those, I mean, the column in these drawings, they look like the columns are in front of those windows. Are they, I mean, so it'll be one thing to lose natural light. It'll be a whole nother thing to have a big post obstructing whatever natural light comes in.
John was just sort of indicating now.
We're very sensitive to the look and function of those windows. So no, there would not be columns in front of those windows, I can guarantee.
Okay.
Next slide. Now we've done here is gone to the end, turned around inside that vestibule, looking back through the atrium. Next slide, please. What it looks like now, here's the mechanical room that's underway. This here is a vent. That will go away once this atrium goes in, and so will this whole glass infill down in here. Next slide. This gives you a little bit more of a feeling of what this atrium looks like. Here, over here is room 11. You can see here, but the columns don't line up with the windows. It's just sort of the view, whether or not, depends on where you stand. House chambers up in here. This is the mechanical room. You can see the vents gone. They've gone through new doors, so it's not looking so mechanical-like, but you still then are able to look down all the way to the new west entry. But you do, yes, we still have columns here to hold up the roof. There's a lot of the way the snow load is going to be in there and the roof's jumping down. That is a concern. Next slide. So what we have now is the interaction with other work that's going on. And with that, we have the HVAC project. The HVAC project's coming along. Although not far enough, otherwise I think we'd be a little warmer in the room. But units 1 through 5 are complete. We also, we are 5 is not 100% complete. Otherwise, we have some air going on at the other end of the building, but they're working on that now along with air handler 6. This future addition impacts 7 and 8, depends on what happens. If nothing happens to the cafeteria, 8 probably stays the way it is. 7 then becomes the one that we're working on. 7 also is having some minor renovations for the new committee rooms that are going in right now. So the work that they're doing is not lost work. It is work that we'll be able to pick up on and move forward to finish air handler 7. If this addition goes through, I'm not sure what would happen. That's something we still would have to evaluate. So part of this that you're seeing on the left-hand side, when you see the dollars for air handler 7 and 8 of 3.5 million, there's an asterisk on that. And down below, under the mezzanine committee room renovation, there's also an asterisk on that $1 million. And the reason being there is the contractor has given a rough idea, it's roughly $250,000 for the HVAC work that is being done under the committee room renovation.
That's an important point. Oh, sorry.
I do.
Yes, Joe.
I'm wondering if I'm reading this correctly. So planned completion date for the mezzanine, that's the current project that's going on. It has December 2024 and December 2025. I don't know what that means. What is the planned completion?
That's for air handler 7.
Yes.
And I was just about to get into that because that is where under the committee rooms that are being renovated right now, partial, those rooms and everything that then is being renovated for those committee rooms will have the air handler system done. What's not done
When?
this December. Good.
Yes.
There are additional rooms in the first floor that will not be done. That'll be done the following year.
Got it.
Unless, of course, this continues, then I gotta regroup. I'm not saying I wouldn't be doing it, but I don't know what we're doing for air handlers yet. That's something I'll work out later in the.
Sorry, just a follow-up. So when you say it would be done December 2024, unless this continues, I don't know what you mean.
The
by-
December 24 work will be complete.
Okay,
What I don't know is in 25 and 26 and how to make that work. Because I don't want to be putting in stuff that may change. If I gotta put a whole new air handler system in, I don't want to put money into it that I know I'm gonna be carrying. I don't think it will be, but I'm just not there yet. So I just need more work, and that's why there is that date. Plus, we don't have time right now to finish all that work.
Yeah.
So that was our original plan anyways, how the whole HVAC project is going. So we're on schedule for that.
Representative Emmons?
Yes, I have a question on the mezzanine and then what is being asked for moving money from the current HVAC system pot of money for the mezzanine. You've got $1 million for those committee rooms, those 2 committee rooms that are currently under construction. But you're also saying that you're going to be requesting in the capital bill about $250,000 from the current pot of money that we have for the current HVAC system to be allocated to the mezzanine committee rooms. So is that $250,000 that will be reallocated for the work to be done, to be completed at the end of 25, calendar year 25? Or is that going to be needed to backfill to have those rooms ready by the end of this calendar year?
That 250,000 is the work that is being done, replacing the air handler unit and the additional ductwork, unit ventilators that are going in, cabinet heaters that are going in to regulate the air conditioning and the heat in the new committee rooms. So the thought being there is that $250,000 is work that HVAC project would have done, but it's being done now under the committee project. And if you believe that the money should be transferred from the HVAC project to the committee project or to the legislature, that we need that language to actually do that.
You just want the clarity of where the
Yes,
money.
correct, if everybody agrees.
So at this point, for these 2 committee rooms, it's anticipated right now about $1 million for those 2 committee rooms, plus the $250,000, but that's already sort of incorporated in the whole HVAC system, but we're just going to move the $250 for the 2 committee rooms. So the total cost for the 2 committee rooms is about 1.25 million, of which 1 million is money coming elsewhere.
No, the 250,000 would be, when we add, that is added to the mezzanine project, the cost of the mezzanine project would be reduced to 750. So the total mezzanine project cost is $1 million.
Okay.
So the way I look at it, and this is a very important point because they're 2 separate pots of money. The HVAC project, the $12 million project, is coming from BGS, whereas the mezzanine project is coming out of legislative carry forward. We're paying for that project. So essentially, because the mezzanine project is moving so fast, and it is, knock on wood, on time, some of the Air Handler 7 work that would have been done out of the capital bill, the $12 million, we're doing it now and the legislature is paying for it. So it's almost like it's been paid for twice. So to make up for that and to account for that, we would transfer $250,000 from the capital bill project, the BGS project, to the mezzanine project, which would make the legislative carry forward budget whole. So it's a subtle point, but it's a very important point for the legislature's budget. And I don't know if Catherine Benham was listening to that and she wanted to add anything to that, but it is important for us because the legislative carry forward budget funds lots of different projects, and the mezzanine project is taking a big chunk of it away.
Yes, go ahead. So, sort of in all of this and in looking at the slides that we just went through, the mezzanine project that's happening right now, essentially is that, am I reading into this that that's a temporary fix? And that essentially the two new committee rooms would replace what's happening there? We're not gaining
Right.
2 and 2.
It's a great question, and it's probably something where Jlmc will give us direction, is that the 2 mezzanine rooms were originally viewed as temporary. The mezzanine was not an attractive space, not to be critical of the mezzanine, but it was not an attractive space, and we were not anticipating the 2 new committee rooms would be a comfortable space long-term or permanently for committees, 11-person committee rooms, essentially house committee rooms. Project is, I need some wood product, is, because I'm jinxing everything, but it's moving along very well, and it feels very open. And actually, these committee rooms have lots of windows. They have more windows than any of the committee rooms that currently exist for House. So it's possible that these could be permanent committee rooms. It's essentially turning into a bit of a suite area, 2 committee rooms with 2 bathrooms and a sink and refrigerator. So it's going to be potentially a very nice space for committees to stay, perhaps on a permanent basis. And if that was the case, then we would reevaluate the 2 committee rooms you just saw in the proposal in the that are above the vestibule.
So thank you for that, because it wasn't like totally clear about whether they stayed or whether they were being replaced. And I guess I'm not a big fan of spending over $1 million on a temporary basis, to be
Yes.
perfectly honest.
When we did think about that, and converting small offices into bigger spaces does have a long-term benefit for the State House. There's no shortage of space needs, which is actually something I wanted to bring up at the end of your presentation, Joe, is that there's public that has space needs, there's members that have space needs, there's also the staff that have pretty.
We need meeting rooms here. I mean, we always
Yes.
need meeting rooms. I don't dispute any of that. I just would not want to see us in, I mean, we're already done that. I would want us to be able to retain those rooms in addition to whatever it is we might add it by way of other committee rooms, or maybe keeping those as committee rooms and those as meeting, the new ones as meeting rooms or whatever. But, so thank you. That's helpful.
I'm glad we've come around to this mini discussion because in my memory, when we greenlit a very basic phase 1 was going to have ingress, egress, the new entrance, et cetera, I didn't remember that committee rooms were there.
I went back and looked at the December presentation. The committee rooms were not in
Right.
that presentation.
So not surprising. Not that I'm against committee rooms, but we have yet to have the conversation about what those spaces will be used for. We have had the conversation about the mezzanine rooms and who's going to go in there and what rooms would be freed up. So I guess my only hesitation about greenlighting this is that I worry we'll get into an advanced stage before the 2 chambers agree on the use of those spaces. And I feel like the pandemic was a moment where we rushed into some things and then we didn't agree, and that turned out not to be good for anybody. So I'm thinking that we should be very clear-eyed. If we have 2 brand new spaces in this rendering, that's wonderful. Under current dispensation, the Senate has lost access to the Ethan Allen room, for instance, which used to be a nice windowed space for us to meet. I understand that space considerations now have that with the House. But if we do bring on some premier spaces like that, I hope we'll have thoughtful discussions before we greenlight it about what rights House and Senate may have to those new spaces.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, I think, to me, it doesn't make sense I mean, just being in the building on an everyday basis, it's very evident that we need more sort of what I guess I would call public spaces where, you know, we have the ability to reserve them for meetings, for things like that. So I'm not as concerned about the addition of the space. You know, I agree with you about like reaching agreement. Like, I think the Ethan Allen room should return to a meeting room myself personally. I don't think it's really a space that's that conducive location wise and space wise for a committee meeting, but yeah. So I'm glad that we're not potentially wasting this $1 million.
No.
That was my main concern.
Yes. We'll have a lot more conversations as this goes, but this is getting us set up for these future conversations, so.
And I like to look at it as not $1 million project, but $750,000
Yes,
project.
I hear you, Agatha. I don't blame you, being very. Why don't you just pay for those HVAC out of your budget instead of doing all this machinations and requiring legislative language?
It would essentially be a transfer from BGS back to the legislature.
No, I know, that's what.
Yes. I will say, and can someone knock on wood for me? The materials were ordered today for the air handler, for the mezzanine, and it's fascinating. It's today because the hurricane is hitting tomorrow. So, we had to get the order in today to ensure that we would get them here, on time.
Hopefully sometimes.
Yes. I will just say very quickly, I did neglect to introduce Sherilyn from BGS, who is also project manager on this project. Sorry about that, Sherilyn.
Next slide. Now we're back into the HVAC project, and what the slides I'm showing you here now are that you see the top of the screen, the mezzanine that's purple. This is the first floor of the 1920s edition, and then the tannish orange color is the first floor. And we have two separate air handlers. Purple is air handler 7. The tan orange color is air handler 6. Air handler 6 is going in now. However, we still have to come back next year to handle the airflow that we want to push to the house, 20s, 30s, and 40s. We have to come back in and increase the size of the ductwork, get rid of the induction units. The induction units are one on the sidewall that control the heating and cooling, and ductwork overhead to drop it down overhead to help with the distribution of the airflow into the room a lot better. So this is what baseline. Next slide.
So what you're saying is that we shouldn't anticipate any real improvement this year.
That is correct. We will have new air handler, but our problem is the noise of the ductwork if we push more air.
Yeah.
It bothers the people in the side. You may not, have that concern.
I don't know, we just freeze. It's like one or the other in the 40s. It's you're either freezing or you're boiling.
It's fine. I'll take it. What we have here is the mezzanine level in that just small little area of purple for air handler 7. So the rest of that space is being picked up now by the committee. So there's very little on the mezzanine level that we have to do, but we still have to do the whole first floor and ductwork that's involved there. Next slide. Left behind also is all of air handler 8 is that teal blue at the top, which is the cafeteria area, speaker's office, look at the house. And we have the tan area again, that is the 30s. Next slide. Third floor, yet again, changing out of the ducting units. That'll be done next year. Next slide. Then we come to the dollars that Freeman has estimated on doing the addition with the 2 committee rooms. Everything else is involved. They've had a little bit more time to study what this atrium is going to be looking like with the roofs and the likes of that. And it's at 24.85 million. And that does not include the site work, because as I said earlier, we haven't ventured down the road of what the site is going to look like until we know what we're looking at here. And if you say yes to this, we will be moving forward with the design, the completion of schematic design, which is roughly 4 months, design development roughly 6. If everything moves like we hope it does, construction documents and then construction, we believe will be 20 months. And the reason for the 20 months is we won't be doing it construction during a legislative session.
Do you mean it would start in 20 months? Or,
No, the duration of construction would be 20 months because we've got that short window of when you go home and when you got to clean up to come back.
just wondering if you can, it's hard for me to push this out. What would be the completion date if everything that you were saying went according to those duration periods? So it would be
A little over 3 years.
3 years.
And this is if everything goes smoothly through permitting.
Yeah.
Always a good caveat. The funding to date so far is mainly been using the ARPA funds. We had 1.5 provided for that. However, my understanding is the 5 million has been removed, that we're down to 1 million. And that was because we had to encumber any of those funds by the end of September.
Representative Lemon?
I just want to backtrack. I'm trying to figure out where you got the 24.8 million. When we started here, just looking at the first designs of scenario 1, phase 1 was 11.6 million. So where is that additional 13.2 million? What's covered under the 13.2? What was added to that 11.6 to come up to 24.8? Is that 24.8 still for just scenario 1? Or was some other items added? Because 24.8 million is pretty steep.
Scenario 1 has been expanded by adding the 2 committee rooms over the entrance. And by doing that to fit the committee rooms in, the entryway got larger. But I think that once we also looked at the need of the entryway, it too also needed to be larger to get us that space to come in and process people for whatever reason. So and that's basically where that's come from. Also, I believe, and John, jump in here, we have a better idea of snow loads in the roof, the columns for the atrium, the eastern stair towers on both coming from the Senate and also cafeteria and the speaker's office. What else would I be missing in that?
Yeah, the size of the entryway, just to elaborate on that a bit, was primarily because there was a decision made, and there's 2 ways to go about this. One is, do you queue people outside in the cold or do you queue people inside? See, the original design had people queued outside to minimize the appearance of the entryway. But through the discussions in the programming and design phase, schematic design phase, it was stated that it would be preferable to have people queue inside into a conditioned space. So that's why it enlarged in part, as Joe mentioned, and then putting program space above it then increases the structure that's needed to require to carry that, of course. And then you have to expand that in order to access that space. So it's not just the room itself, but on the second and third floor, you have to expand it out to reach the circulation space. So that increased as well. And one other thing that we looked at while we were looking at it in more detail, because programming, you're just looking at squares on a plan. That's really what you're doing, is capturing square footage. Now, when you do schematic design, you're starting to look at 3 dimensions and how does that work? And one of the things that builds upon an earlier point is we're very sensitive to the historic state house. We don't want to impact that negatively. And that's been very important for us as we look at this in 3 dimensions. And partly because of that, atrium volume changed. Because the 2 sides, the existing state house and then the speaker's addition on the back, are at 2 different elevations. The windows don't align in those levels. So to put a roof at any other point means you're going to be cutting through some windows. So it ended up pushing the roof up and up, which actually helps for snow because we have a snow load and we don't want to drop a large distance down onto that roof for impact. But it does mean we're conditioning more space. It does mean we have larger structural elements, so the price goes up to accommodate them, to have that sensitivity to the historic elements.
Also, I might add, it didn't have the elevator and that stair tower. So because we were going up 2 more stories, we needed the stair tower and the elevator.
So I'm trying to process all this, and it seems we've gone way beyond, and maybe we haven't because of the designs of the current building, but we've gone way beyond what was approved last December, which was scenario 1 for ADA and life safety issues. And we had it laid out in our scenario 1 last year that it would be new entry, infill lobby, new egress stairs, egress site path, elevators, sprinklers, mechanical, doorways to be widened throughout the current State House, if possible, and some restrooms. What we just went through seems to be very, very different. Now, maybe I'm off base here, but it seems to be very different than what we had envisioned back in December. So I may be the only one feeling this way. But it seems a lot more in depth and doing a lot of major changes that I don't know if this whole committee had envisioned it to be like this. So I just want to put that on the table. I may be the only one that's seeing it this way.
I think Representative Emmons, it's accurate, and the biggest change is the addition of the 2 new committee rooms. And it will be likely a decision point for this committee if those 2 new committee rooms are necessary now. We'd have to go back to Freeman French Freeman and talk about, can we build without those 2 new committee rooms now, but with potential to build in the future if the mezzanine rooms are considered sufficient for long-term use. Another thing I would add is, and we haven't expressly stated this, but the original entryway, as it was designed smaller, was for screening for COVID or pandemic or illness-related issues. And as Chief Polway has come on board and as I've come on board, we've been expressing interest in adding more than just screening for illness, screening for security. And so that has added some components to the entryway, and maybe part of the reason of why it's bigger. The new entryway gives us many more options for screening for security purposes as well.
You have Representative Shaw and then Senator Brewer.
Thanks. Joe, I mean, we've been talking about this for a long time. We're seeing construction projects up 20, 30, 40% in the real world. How much yield for if we'd have, what's the creep based on economic conditions of that in that 24.85 million?
I really don't have a good answer for you. And part of that reason is 2 hurricanes. We just, on another project that we're working on, looking at for the flood issues that we're dealing here within Montpelier, we're looking at electrical switchgear and chillers to replace. And just this year, we were told the markup is 13%. We just received last week with Helene and Milton coming on board for hurricanes. Order now, we're gonna order. So we've actually put a request into FEMA for us to be ordering that equipment, so we're ahead of the people in the South. Where we were last year, we are actually right now. No idea what the inflation is going to be. When you look at the devastation, it's lumber, it's sheetrock, it's metal, and it's all the electrical stuff. So
if we were just talking the original $11.6 million project, what do you have a feel for what you would expect that if that went to bid today, what that would be?
that 11.6 million had 20% contingency in there. So I would say it was gonna be close to being absorbed if it wasn't for the two hurricanes. But right now, all bets are off. I don't know. Okay. Also, we have to refine that. So that, as we go through design, we learn a lot more.
So 24.8 does not include excavation.
It doesn't, it would include the excavation under the building, but it doesn't include any of the new drives and the likes of that, the approaches that we're talking about, any of that site.
So we could expect seeing a project well over 30 million,
I don't know.
but I guess.
I always get in trouble when I throw out a number here, and you always hold me to it.
Yeah, good.
So, it very well could be up there, yes. I would hope it would not be, but
Realistically speaking, it could be.
with, the inflation that, we were just coming down, we were starting to settle out after COVID, people were going back to work, industry was catching up. And now we have these two major disasters, so it is going to be difficult, I think.
Thank you.
How bad, I do not know.
So I just wanted to back up what Representative Emmons said. That was why at the beginning of the meeting, I asked if this was our phase one or Freeman phase one, because at our December meeting, we had approved, and I think Teresa said this as well, we had approved a phase one that was somewhat less ambitious than this, lower price tag, et cetera, with the idea that then we would, at a later date, take up the other. With that said, I think this is impressive. I think it all makes sense. It's all integrated. Doing it at one time would overall save us money, maybe. So I'm not averse to greenlighting what we saw. I do want to note that it's not what I think the committee had agreed on. And so I think we need to get back to agreement on what we're doing. But I'm willing to be led by this proposal because it does seem to be very well thought out. But to return to where it was before, part of what we were doing by making it phase one was we were eliminating all of the potentially more difficult issues about the expansion, and we were just dealing with federal mandates and ingress, egress, safety issues, et cetera. So if we are going to greenlight this, I think it would be a mistake to do that at this meeting. I think we would need an additional meeting because in essence, we need to go back to our teams and figure out what we're willing to do at this point, and what our understanding is chamber to chamber about what that new space would look like.
My understanding is that this was an update on where things are in the process. And for this committee, there was work done during the legislative session in the Capitol bill, and then there was work done through joint rules. So there's multiple things that have happening and with us too on this project. So I guess I think it's clear that we all agree that we want to keep on with our goals with phase one, but there are other things that have been included for other reasons that we need to discuss more. And so what do you need from this committee today?
The rest of the slideshow? I guess we do not need to, or that was.
Yeah,
Just in case you had time and understand that. So then we have decision points, and it is, we were not to have any impact on the existing committee rooms. So what you're arguing right now, my understanding is that everything that's being done does not comply with using the ARPA funds. Because what we had put forth on plans to rearrange you is just, you're not doing that. So you're not providing that 20 square foot per person in the rooms that are smaller. So there's that. Going forward, there was also the phase one and phase two. This has increased, and my concern is we're not looking at phase two. Is there going to be a phase two? Because I think when you look back at the addition of the cafeteria, we've been struggling over many years of how to put an addition one way or another onto this building. We were also charged with including infrastructure for future expansion. If we only stick to what we were doing in scenario phase one as presented today, I'm good with that, but I fear of the future. When we did the stair tower and the elevator addition on the western side, it was more of adding office space onto that side of the building, and that's how we got that set back into the ledge a little bit. With what we have now, I think you could still put an addition back there, but we haven't given that any thought. Because right now, if you go back and look at your slides, you'll see that it's not this wide path corridor going from what could be a future addition on that western side down into the center part of the State House. Is there going to be anything on the eastern side? I hate to build two stair towers, and then later on, we need additional room, and they may or may not come into play. I think the one off of the Senate chamber would be just fine. If we're looking to build back into the ledge a little bit, then those stairways go away, and you'd have more of an interior set of stairs. So it's really, do we want to take and step back and look at what phase two would be, if anything? It could be that we evaluate it, and with what's being presented today, square footage wise, it covers everything. I do know that BGS, mainly my mechanical engineer, is kicking David and his stuff, well, not you, David, but your stuff, out of the mechanical rooms. The equipment is larger than what was there before, and the space is tighter. David has no storage. We haven't evaluated that in this. I believe Agatha has mentioned, I want to say 2 individuals at least, or 2 workstations, and there's probably more. You mentioned additional meeting space. Is that yet another small addition that we should be considering and just taking, and I know it spreads out the time, takes a little bit more money, but that was the phase 2 option that we were going to get to. And so I put that before you, and then how basically the interaction of what we're doing with phase 1, how do we deal with the HVAC work? The HVAC work that I'm doing in the 20s, 30s, and 40s, if we're going to go forward with phase 1, I would probably combine those, because I may be looking for a better air handler that can take on the new space and maybe provide it to probably the 3rd floor. But I don't know all that yet, because I don't want to give that up, and I got to integrate everything. So all that comes into play, and then I guess it's really, do we come back to see you for the approval, or how do we make this work? So those are my questions that I believe he just needs answers on, so I can direct the architect on how to move forward.
Senator Ingalls. Go ahead.
Thank you. I apologize. Just had a minute to find the unmute button. So just a couple comments before we move on. I want to go back to what the pro tem was saying about laying claim to some space, and I want to make sure that the Senate does have a say in the matter. One of them being is that we're certainly struggling for some space between the Ag Committee sharing a room. So I know that there will be more discussions about that, but I want to put a claim in there that we certainly would be looking to get some more space for an Ag Committee room. And I just want to clear up again as where Chair Emmons was going with this about the size of the project, and just in my own mind, kind of figure out where we are on money. I mean, I know the phase 1, we were $11.6 million, and I think that we had committed monies for that. And then we had some carry forward monies that the legislature was going to come up with on carry forward dollars. But how much of this project is new dollars that we're going to be either putting a strain on the capital bill or looking for new funding?
There's $120,696 left from Act 69 of 23. That was I can't remember if that was cash fund or not. Thank you. So it was out of the cash fund that was given there. I said they were very tight on what's remaining of the ARPA dollars. So 24 plus million would have to come from the capital bill.
So I think your question was, what do we need from JLMC? And I don't know if we've answered that. I think the planning group, which consists of BGS, state curator, legislature, historic preservation, Freeman French Freeman. We would like to keep planning. We'd like to keep moving forward. These are in a lot of ways concepts that you've seen. We'd like to keep planning. I think the questions for me, I don't know if you share these, Joe, are the 2 new committee rooms. Are they required? Are they necessary? This group might not be able to answer that right now. We might have to wait and see how the mezzanine project goes. But also, space needs in general, there are a lot of space needs, and this project did start as an entryway and a corridor, an ADA and safety. But it is an opportunity to address space needs if they do exist. Joe mentioned storage. We have a space issue with staff. I'll just mention 2 Aiken, for example, where all the lawyers are. If they hire one more lawyer, they have officially outgrown 2 Aiken. And what does that mean for HR? That's also in the building. Does HR come to the State House? So there's a lot of moving parts. Security plays into this. I think it's honest and noteworthy to recognize that Chief Poley and myself have come on board in the middle of this project. And we have a lot of security ideas that could and I would say should be incorporated into the new expansion project. So the ask is at some point to determine whether or not the 2 new committee rooms are necessary. I'm recognizing that we can't answer that today, and to allow the team to keep working on this so that we can check back at a future date and see where the space needs conversations have gone, and if the mezzanine is completed on time, whether or not the 2 new committee rooms are necessary.
Absolutely. And I think, we're we as JLMC are keeping this conversation and this work going in between sessions. And so I think that you stated that perfectly, that we can't answer the question now about the 2 rooms, but the ADA work and the rest of the project is critical to continue to move forward. And so Representative Emmons, I see your hand up, and then we'll wrap up.
So thank you, Agatha, for putting that thought on the table, because for the committee, when we look at a schematic design, this is the first look. A schematic design is intended to be the first look at a proposed project. The next step, once that gets approved, the next step is to move into a design document that refines more of the layout of the project, what the project will really look like, and defines further what the cost of that project is. So we're at the very first step right now in terms of the schematic design. So what Agatha put on the table about having a working group or a planning group or the partners who are going to be involved, I would really recommend that they meet on a regular basis, every week, every 2 weeks, to really work through this schematic design and have all the players at the table, because I don't want to get into a situation where one entity says, well, the other entity didn't connect with us and made these decisions, or vice versa. I want everyone who's affected by this proposal to be at the table in the beginning to work through to get to the next design document, whatever that might be. So I would really recommend that and I'm not a member of JLMC, we're just kind of added on specifically for the State House expansion, but I would really recommend that JLMC recommend that the working group, there's a working group or the partners come together every other week or every week and work through this. The other thing I can just say, in terms of where the money is going to come from for this project, for the capital bill, what is being recommended by the Debt Affordability Committee is $50 million a year each year for the next 2 years. Last biennium, we worked with 54 million per year for a total of 108 million bonding capacity for 2 years. We have now been decreased by 8 million. So we are at $100 million now for 2 years for our capital budget. So I just want to put that on the table so people are aware of the pressures that are being put on the capital bill and not having the capacity possibly to deal with everything we want to deal with.
Be Representative Emmons. And can you remind us, Agatha, there is a group that's meeting how often?
It's supposed to be every other week. We haven't met very much this summer. But it does include the major stakeholders, BGS, Freeman French Freeman, Historic Preservation, State Curator, Tricia. Am I leaving anyone out?
You?
Me. I'm there. Yes.
Okay, well, I hope that the group can really start meeting and committing to that goal of every other week, because I do think it would be helpful for everyone and important in keeping this conversation going. Representative Wood.
I just have a question. I know, when we met and talked about this before, we talked about a public engagement process, and I know that there was a survey that was put out. I did, if the results were put out there, I haven't seen them. I just wondered.
We can reshare those. It felt like 10 years ago, but we did share
All right,
the
thank you.
results and an update. I'm happy to send those out again to refresh everyone's.
Thank you. I
Yeah.
appreciate it.
And if you don't mind me suggesting, in addition to public engagement, I would recommend a staff engagement. Staff really haven't had much exposure to any of this. And also I'd include the Friends of the Vermont State House, who have worked for years on the building and have a lot of vested interest in the building and are very interested in this project. And I'd be happy to go talk to the Friends about this project.
Seems like that's.
Yeah, the Friends were involved in the last go around, but that was with the information we got today. So that would be great. All right. Well, thank you so much for this update. Oh, Senator.
Just an overall comment as I look at this.
Yeah.
It's a lot of money.
I know.
It's a lot of money. And I think we have to ask ourselves, if you're a member of the public looking at what the legislature spends, and you talk about spending this amount of money, we don't have any more legislators than we had 30 years ago. Why do we find it necessary, other than to do things like the ADA compliance issue? Is this necessary?
That's the conversation we're having, somebody. Yeah. You've not made any final calls on that. So I think we'll keep on talking and figuring out what's the best plan to fit our needs right now. For sure.
And I don't disagree with the amount that it is a lot of money. And I would like to refocus that none of these improvements are really for the legislators. This isn't to make your work life more comfortable necessarily. It is about the public. It's about helping them have access to the building. So I just want to make that point, because it could be awkward or uncomfortable to expend this amount of money on something that could be perceived to benefit the legislators. But this project really is about making the experience for Vermonters or people visiting the Vermont State House be more comfortable and be more safe.
Well, I think I agree with you to that extent. At the same time, I'm not sure how many more people we have visiting the legislature than we've had in the past. There may be numbers that would reflect that. But at the same time, we found that we got much greater participation over the COVID period from people being able to attend electronically than we ever had before, coming in and sitting and listening to us live. And I think that's going to continue. So I'm not convinced at all that the public, and as we ask the public, are you benefiting from our expending this money? And are you willing to pay for it? And that's the key issue, because somebody's got to pay for this. And it's the public, ultimately. No matter how it's routed through, it's the public that's going to pay for this thing.
Joe, and then we'll go to Senator Ingalls.
Just trying to clarify and get a better understanding of what I think I heard is that we as a committee that we've been working on for this whole design is to go back come up with a plan coming forward, and that is include everything we spoke of, including phase two, on how to then move forward. Is that?
Actually, I don't think that's where we are. I would hate to see more work go into this design before we've greenlit it. Because I think what we're saying is we greenlit as a committee a smaller version. So I think now it's good for members of the committee and leadership to go back, talk about it. Do we want to pursue that 2-conference room, 3-story design at this point? If we do, then I think it makes good sense to have the committee keep pursuing that, or your working group.
Right, but I'm also looking at, do we take into account additional meeting rooms? Because the meeting rooms that we have may work by offsetting 2 new committee rooms above the entrance. That you have the ones that they're being under construction right now. Is that enough? Am I taking that into consideration? Or are we just evaluating what we're doing in phase one?
If I could suggest to the chair, it says on our materials that we have a possible December meeting
November.
or November meeting. I would be all for taking this up again at that meeting and deciding this question then, the conference room question. But I'm not comfortable right now going forward with that because, for instance, Senator Kitchell couldn't be with us today. She's not feeling well. She and I had long discussions about our position on that ADA accessible, safety, minimal design that we greenlit. So I'd like to put my head together with her as well as others.
And that's the direction I'm looking for. So we shouldn't continue anymore on this until we get better direction from you in November. We could meet and have discussions of the additional meeting rooms and the likes of that.
Yeah, I just don't want to waste your time if the decision ultimately is not to have those rooms and you have 3 more meetings roughing those out.
But I was just trying to better understand that. Thank you.
I would anticipate that we would be meeting in mid-November, so I don't know, hitting pause right now for what? If that makes a huge difference. I don't think it does, right? All right, Senator Ingalls and then Representative Shaw.
Well, I'd hate to see the pause on any movement forward on Joe's part, and I think those discussions should be moving forward. I'm also concerned about the money as well, and I do see the ADA part of this of what we agreed to way early. I think that is something that we actually owe the public to make the building a little bit more ADA compliant. But I don't hear the public telling us that they need new space in this building. I think it's more to benefit the legislators than anything. The money scares me. The money at this point in time, where we have a lot of issues going on as we're hearing in the election cycle. People are very, very concerned about money. I'm gonna have a hard time getting on board with this at this price. That's just where I'm at with that.
Yeah. Representative Shaw.
So, Joe, where do you stand on the original $11.6 million that we agreed to earlier? Where do you stand on that project? Or did you just shelve that project when the additional 2 committee rooms came on board?
It didn't really get shelved. What we were looking at grew. So it grew for additional space on the first floor for screening. And because of that additional space, I think there was an ask. They were, Sergeant Arms was already looking at committee rooms. Could that be incorporated? And sure, it could be incorporated. So that's where it has grown from. It doesn't take everything into account because there was supposed to be a phase 2. And I think that's where I would prefer to go is let's look at the big picture, decide what everybody needs, and then present a plan to you that truly is a phase that said, we can build phase 1 with phase 2, 3 in the future with that in mind. What I cannot do is you tell me to cut the budget or cut out 2 committee rooms 2 years from now and go, well, I wish we want to add them back in. If I know that going in, we can design the structure to handle that going forward and also look for the HVAC. So we're not throwing anything away and going backwards. But I'd like to complete that first to see the big picture, and then work back. And I'm not looking for a master plan that everybody's thinking, we're gonna do this in 10, 20 years. It's what's the need right now that we're hearing today to get us to what we really need and go, we can afford the 24 million, I can afford 11. What are we gonna get out of 11 and make that work?
I guess that's my question, and I don't know yet.
Yes. Why are you talking that?
And I don't know if it's possible at our next meeting to have what we had already greenlit represented as you showed us today. In other words, a schematic without the conference rooms, but just what we talked about at our December meeting last time. Does that make sense? In other words, you say it grew.
Yes.
Can you show us what it would have looked like before you grew?
I believe you have a sketch of that,
At the
Sean, right?
November
Correct?
It's easy to bring up to this level.
Okay,
Okay.
so we can.
Thank you. Thank you for that. All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Really appreciate it, your work on this.
Good afternoon.
All right, committee. So we are, the last agenda item is a security update and conversation. And due to the sensitive nature of the conversation, I will need a motion to go into executive session.
So.
Thank you. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Executive session?
Okay,
Are you okay?
yes, I have to go move my car.
That's okay. All those opposed? All right, motion carries. We will take a quick, short break to reconfigure for executive session. Senator Ingalls and Representative Emmons, you're welcome to stay if you want, but you don't have to. It's up to you.
I think it would be important because our committee is involved in security issues.
True.